Alright, go ahead.
Is it on?
Well, it's over here, but you don't need to face it. See your whole profile.
As important as holding down one, two, or three jobs were my father's daily routines. To him, important. Uh, he was employed by the town band at the age of 8 years old, and also during the First World War. At 9 years old, peeling boiling hot potatoes for the war effort, and the, the various routines were as follows. He practiced the flute 4 hours a day, every day, without fail. It took once a month he would give himself a reprieve from that requirement, daily requirement. He played piccolo in the town band, and received a weekly check for that at the age of 8 years old. And then the second job he had, don't don't ever forget the extent of the Van Vactor family's poverty. The second job he had was working as a soda jerk in the town drugstore, which had a counter where they could get things like chocolate. They used carbonated water, which they shot into chocolate ice cream, a glass full of chocolate ice cream and chocolate in the bottom, and then he would also maybe draw some kind of drink like soda pop or ginger ale or Coca-Cola. I mean, I just don't know what was fashionable in this time. At any rate, the other routine was, as a boy, he ran 10 miles every morning before breakfast, which would cause him to throw up whatever was in his stomach before he ate breakfast. And later jobs had to do with when he was going to Northwestern, but to get up at 4:30 in the morning to drive a bakery truck and deliver baked goods to various households in Evanston. And then during the summers, he worked in the lumber yard in Evanston. His co-workers were mostly African Americans, very strong men. He drank something like 4 quarts of milk a day, and would pack a lunch there to the lumber yard. The second part of his morning routine was to, after he stopped drinking coffee, which made him feel too nervous, was to make his tea. Always Twinings. He had a little crock that would hold the tea leaves, through which he would pour hot water and make himself tea. It was usually probably an orange pekoe. Fairly good Twinings tea also used. I don't know. It was usually Earl Grey. He'd have his tea, and then he would squeeze fresh oranges and make a big pot of fresh orange juice, and he would then make up my mother's tray, which he'd carry for her breakfast, which he would carry up to her every day with the little orange juice and the milk she would use with a heater, a little coil that she put in the milk to make her herself some Nestle coffee, and it's very important. This service he paid my mother. This breakfast in bed brought up to her, which she'd have beside her bed. It took my mother a long time to wake up. She did not sleep very much. She always woke up rather down. And when I was a little tiny boy, come into her room and I'd shake the end of her bed, pull the end of the wooden bed frame, and she hated that. She'd lay back in bed, and so I'd have to let her be until up came the tray that my father had spread for her, and they would greet each other. And then my father would go into his bedroom and shave and take a shower, brush his teeth, and get dressed, always immaculately dressed. It's quite a handsome figure he cut when he come in to greet her before going down to teach classes or to show up at the National Symphony office to deal with all the problems of the symphony, managing the symphony orchestra, which he and his secretary, Betty Moody, took care of without an ongoing symphony manager on salary. He did this for years without any salary to keep the costs down. And then the big job every month was preparing himself with meeting the board members of the Knoxville Symphony, the president of the board, usually somebody like the president of the Tennessee Valley Bank or somebody like that, John Culver or various people in the community. And he would meticulously prepare the budget for the coming months and even the next 3 months for the monthly board meeting. And this was all done with Betty Moody's help and all the secretarial work that went with it, the copies of the budget made and typed on probably on onion paper with some carbon paper between the sheets, so there were copies of everything carefully kept in place in files at the Symphony office, which was in the bottom of the Farragut Hotel in downtown Knoxville, right on Gay Street, with a parking lot behind it where my father always parked in one of his cars, either his Buick or later his 190 SL Mercedes-Benz sports car. He would wake after having probably consumed a quarter of a bottle of bourbon the night before when he had drinks with my mother. for dinner, and then that might be followed in the evening with uh, either shots of bourbon in a shot glass, or and followed by sips of Heineken's beer, which he always had available in the ice in the refrigerator, cooling, which he always bought by the kids. Heineken's his favorite, and as we said, the whiskey made the beer taste better, and the beer made the whiskey taste better. He had an extraordinary metabolism. Before bed, another one of his routines was to take citrocarbonate, which is made by the pharmaceutical company called Upjohn's. It would renew the salt, whatever salts he had lost in metabolizing the alcohol. So he never had a hangover. Never a hangover. Even though he would drink this huge amount of ounces and ounces of whiskey, usually Jim Beam, and then after he retired, before lunch, or he would have Beefeater's gin, usually just on the rocks, no vermouth. That's the way my mother liked it too. They were both tremendous consumers of alcoholic beverages. She continued that into her mid-80s, and finally stopped drinking when he moved to California after he broke his hip and healed up from that. He would wake up and sleep very deeply, snoring very loud, and I mean he really got the rest he needed with this incredible output of energy and activity. He would wake at 5:30 in the morning. He would make his tea, have his glass of orange juice, make a little prayer, look down the river where the sun would come up through the iron supports of the called the Alcoa Bridge. You look through the bridge, the crisscross of the bridge structure. You could see the sunrise above the cliffs that over the Tennessee River, where there were cannons implanted, which would lob cannonballs over the river toward Fort Sanders, which was then made into a hospital. This is where he had his hip repaired after it broke. And after that point, this is a man who had run the 100-yard dash in 10 flat, which is not a great time. One of my friends used to do it in 4.6. We ran for the Hill School in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, which was actually the rival school of Lawrenceville, my secondary school. This was Ty Porter who ran it and ran the 100 in 4.6. He's a great track man, and later an architect. Anyway, after my father healed up in a nursing home from his operation to repair his hip, where it was broken, but that was done at Fort Sanders Hospital. And it did not break in a fall. It just broke from the sheer weight of his body hanging on the hip joint. He got up in the night, and it had been a very stormy time, in which he told when he was remembering an altercation we had had on the island where we spent our summers on Vinyl Haven. He told my son Davy that the only way he'd talk to me was with a loaded gun in his hand. It was that night that I heard him get up in the night. I was sleeping in my old sister's bedroom, and I heard him get up in the night, and then I heard a loud thump when his body fell to the ground in his bedroom, which had been my bedroom. And next door, went in there, and he was on the floor. We called the ambulance and took him up to the emergency at Fort Sanders. And as I was starting to say, after he would make his little prayer, morning prayer, looking at the rising sun up the river, through the structure of the Alcoa Bridge, he would then start to write music. Go in and sit down, and in the bathroom, he always had a block of cardboard which he put across his knees, and he wrote with a fine line shaper pencil, which had an eraser on it. He had been shown by Willem Steinberg, who played his First Symphony, later renumbered his Third Symphony in Pittsburgh, at the house of the Steinbergs, Mr. and Mrs. Steinberg. I later got to know their son, Arthur, who was an archaeologist who studied with Hofmann at Harvard. In their possession, they had a valuable relic, which was a slate. I think it had a wood frame around it that they had bought probably in some antique store, which had belonged to Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. And he had used this, carried this slate on his journeys that he took with his father around Europe, playing as a prodigy, playing piano concerts and recitals for all the courts of Europe. He was taken all over Europe by stagecoach. On his knees, he would write some of his early symphonies and works for piano. And it was a revelation to see this, to be shown this by Mr. and Mrs. Steinberg, staying in their place in Pittsburgh before the first performance of his First Symphony, later renamed to Third Symphony. And on a CD, on a compact disc, with also his other works of his Ode for the Dead, that came from his Music for Marines, as the slow movement, the andante or adagio of that work. And then also on that same compact disc is the 4 etudes for winds and percussion, which I see now as a kind of Ninth Symphony. If one, he wrote 7 symphonies, and then a very powerful choral symphony, which I might number his 8th symphony. And if one numbered the 4 etudes for winds and percussion, it could be numbered, since it was written for concert band, and performed, he recorded it with the Frankfurt Radio Orchestra, or the Hessian Rundfunk Orchestra, in German it's called. That should be called his 9th symphony. It was written for concert band, but he recorded it with the Frankfurt Radio Orchestra, and they had a very, very good brass section, and a very good wind section of all the winds, flutes, oboes, bassoons, bass clarinets, the whole range of wind instruments. And so I actually like the idea of considering that his Ninth Symphony is written using a tone road, and it has 4 fugues in it. Now he, along with his many jobs that I've mentioned, as a general statement, when he taught at Northwestern, he taught harmony there. He also directed the chamber orchestra so that he gave the young School of Music, Northwestern School of Music, players the opportunity to play through all the major pieces in the literature from all in this chamber orchestra. It was like a training orchestra. He did have a training orchestra at the University of Tennessee. He was not the conductor. William Starr, the concertmaster of the Marshall Symphony, was the conductor of that orchestra. And other people conducted it from time to time, that training orchestra. And his violin concerto written for his friend and concertmaster William Starr was recorded with William Starr conducting. It's actually a pretty good rendition of that violin concerto. When he was at Northwestern, he also, this is when he was teaching 25 flute students and going to rehearsals and playing concerts downtown over the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. He was second flute. And Dorio Anthony Dwyer, who was related to Susan B. Anthony, the great suffragette, women heroine of Chicago, was sent to him to study flute. But instead of teaching her himself, he gave her to his colleague, Ernst Liegel, whom he thought was a better flutist than he was. Now my father, the way he got gotten his job, playing second flute in the Chicago Symphony, Chicago Orchestra, was with the one condition that he go and study with Marcel Moïse, who was considered to be the best flutist in Europe at that time. Well, Moïse lived in Meudon, which is a town right outside of Paris, south of Paris. And when he and my mother went to Paris on their honeymoon, having been married in her parents' garden, and then taken a train up to Montreal to catch the boat to, I think it was at Ile-de-France, to probably landed at Cherbourg, and they took the train into Paris. And the first thing he did when he got to Paris was he left his flute in a restaurant after spilling whatever he was eating on his gabardine suit. Then he had to go to the police and retrieve his, been lost and found. The flute was dutifully taken to the police. He was able to retrieve it at the police headquarters in Paris. The first thing he did was to go for a lesson out to Meudon. And my mother remembers him getting on the bus. Though he spoke really perfect Spanish and German, he never really learned to speak French. So she put him on a bus to Meudon. And she said he looked like a scared artist of wits Here was a country boy from Argos, Indiana, um, more sophisticated after his years in Vienna studying with people like Arnold Schoenberg and Franz Schmidt and studying flute with the first flute of the Vienna Philharmonic. Was a sophistication. He looked scared to death, but she put it, waved to him on the he's standing on the back of the bus where you could look out on the street at what was passing behind one as one pulled out of Paris. He said he looked scared to death. Well, anyway, the lessons in Moudon were soon over because the whole family of the Moïse family, which is really Moses, the Moses family, the whole family spent their vacations in Saint-Amour in the Beaujolais country, one of the best of the Beaujolais wines. In the Commerce Hotel, my parents stayed. My mother had taken enough French so she could negotiate with hotel people. They had master classes he had master classes with Maurice. There was another musician named Benson, a horn player from Denmark, who I think fell in love with my mother. To no particular end. They have master classes with Maurice. I guess Benson was also studying flute at the same time as he was continuing with his French horn playing. I don't know what happened to him. So my father would write up music on a piece of lined note paper on this block of cardboard on which was pasted the master plan of the next work, the work he was working on at present. And in other words, that would be the tone road. The master plan consisted of 12 versions, meaning a version for each of the keys of the chromatic scale, plus the inversion of that tone road, plus the backwards, the retrograde version, plus the retrograde inversion. That yielded 48 versions of the tone roll, which was the tune or the theme of the particular work. And he would do a pencil score with his fine line, Schaefer fine line. And what he'd learned from this slate that Mozart had used is that Mozart probably erased, he was probably writing with some sharp instrument scratching into the slate, and that he could erase what he had written and work on it, do a revision. Mozart was famous for being able to just knock out a fugue like in a few minutes. I mean, his musical genius was so phenomenal. And my father, on his fine line pencil, there was an eraser, so he could actually erase this. And the beauty of it, of this pencil that he used to write probably 40 or 50 of his works, including symphonies and concertos and 36 pieces for woodwinds and other elaborate, less elaborate works of his. He wrote over 100 pieces. His In the plural in Latin of opus would be opera. So he had 100 opera, 100 works of music by the end of his life. And as I've said, I count the band symphony, 4 etudes for winds and percussion, a band symphony. And when he was teaching all these flute students, we were to rehearsals and concerts downtown every day, teaching harmony, first year harmony at Northwestern, and all these flute students. He also did a master's degree on the art of the fugue by Johann Sebastian Bach. At one point, his father, the preacher, said, "Sonny, how do you stand with our Lord?" And my father was a little resistant, and he really stopped being a church goer at a certain point in his life until he took me to an Episcopal church with my mother on Sundays. Now called it, there was St. John's Episcopal Church in Marshall, Tennessee. It's now St. John's Cathedral because of the Diocese of Tennessee has changed. So that there's now St. John's Cathedral. Well, in this 4 etudes for winds and percussion, I have not had the opportunity, which I would like to have at a certain point, to look at his master's thesis on the art of the fugue, because he became himself a master of fugue writing. And in this band symphony, which I now consider could consider a ninth symphony, although there's no strings in this symphony, only woodwinds. He has 4 different fugues. It's very dramatic. After a scherzo, and this comes after having written his 36 pieces for winds. You have his skill writing for woodwinds. It's at its zenith, and he has a marvelous scherzo on the 4 etudes. And after that movement is completed, comes the finale, the final movements of the 4 etudes, or what I'm representing now as his 9th symphony. It ends with 4 magnificent fugues, very exciting, and this all comes from all the work he did on Bach. So his father had said, "How do you stand with the Lord?" Well, he would call him Sonny, Sonny. Or maybe he called him David. He's in a line of Davids. He would be the 4th David, and I'm the 5th David in a line. And my son, David Jr., PhD, would be a 6th David in a line. He said, "How do you stand with our Lord?" My father said to him, rebelliously, said, "Bach is my Lord. Bach is my God." And his father replied to him, "Well, sometime in your life, you may go through a hard stretch, or you may need to turn to our Lord Jesus Christ again. Always keep that in mind. So that was the extent of their exchange about his Christianity, the state of his spiritual life. Now, when he became older, he became quite pious. He would give long prayers of thanksgiving at the dinner table so that everybody would be dying to start eating. Finally, my mother said, "That's enough, Dave. Everybody wants to get started eating." And she would pick up her fork, and then the others could then start to eat the dinner that had been served by one of the lovely African American women who cooked for us and would serve it at the table. And then, at the end of his life, he wrote his episodes, one of his most, a 40-minute work for a large orchestra and double chorus, using a text my sister and I put together from the four Gospels, called Episodes. Episodes meaning in the life of Jesus Christ. And then he wrote his Fourth Symphony, which is dedicated to me, using lines from Henry David Thoreau's Walden, one of the greatest works ever written in America, one of the great works of American literature. He gave me the chore of putting together a text for him. So I went through Walden, chose the best lines, and then got them typed up. And for this bit of work I did for him, he dedicated the Fourth Symphony to me. It's a choral symphony. So he has these several major choral works, starting with work commissioned by Fabian Savitsky of the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, which is called Credo. I don't know, I've never heard this work. I've never heard it before. There is no recording of the original performance, but it's written in a very rich harmonic harmonies, and I think he may have described it to me to the extent that I was able to imagine how it sounded. But one of my ambitions is to be able to have enough funds to pay for some symphony to do the first performance, and to get some choral society, such as he was able to arrange in Knoxville, the Knoxville Choral Society, which is Walden Symphony. And of course the Maryville College Chorus did did the episodes in the life of Jesus Christ, and then it came out as a long playing record, and then I think I may have his publisher Roger Rhodes has made it available on a CD to me and to others in the family. Should be on an iPod, an Nanopod. Because compact discs sometimes get damaged, so that the sound is destroyed. You get all sorts of funny sounds from it. But the iPod pretty well preserves. You can use the music on compact disc and get them into an iPod, record it into an iPod. They're in pretty good shape as far as preserving the sound, the high fidelity of whatever has been recorded. And here I conclude this most recent addendum to the history of my father's career in music and the way he lived his life. One thing I wanted to say about his original family, composed of his mother Matilda Fenstermacher Van Vactor and his father David Ellsworth Van Vactor, is that they had their own routines in the household. He had an adopted sister, Venus Van Vactor, who had been superintendent of schools someplace in Plymouth County, in Plymouth, Indiana, and kept in touch with her all her life. Her father always referred to her as the smartest student ever in the whole Argus school system. And she had a great career as a teacher, was married, and I don't know if she had children, but he always kept in touch with her, had many letters. She was a very, very pretty young woman. I have one picture of her and her. And then there was Lloyd Miller, or Miller, probably spelled M-U-E, because it probably the U had been umlaut, M-U-E-L-L-E-R. He was an adopted son of one of my grandfather's brothers. And so that there were not only his two sisters, Evelyn and Anna Catherine, who was later Anna Catherine Malloy. She married Walter Malloy, who was the best athlete in the Argus, at Argus High School, where my father played basketball and ran track. So in this family, there were routines. Everybody got a bath in one of those tubs, probably made of tin, once a week on Saturday. My father's chore was to clean the chicken house, which was a great nuisance as far as he was concerned. I suppose because of the smell. But they had chickens for dinner. Chicken for dinner because of this. This is his. He religiously did that chore. The other thing they would do together as a family, this was before people were entertained by television. My grandfather, David Ellsworth, read every day to them from Les Miserables, written by the Dumas, father and son. And they also sang four-part harmony as a family. And this is because probably to pay people to be soloists in a church, a small town church choir, would have taken more money to pay for people to be on call, to be choral singers, would have taxed the church too much. And my grandfather there was a competitor named Robinson who was trying to move in on him. And my grandfather, David Ellsworth, was not only an inventor and a woodworking factory owner who made porch towers and built houses in the town, 400 of them, which he built. But he was also a circuit preacher. He had 7 churches that he would send sermons to every week, typed, single space, put them in the mail, and then finally his church was doing so well because he had his own theology, something about, it was a Church of Christ, one of the Church of Christ churches, Protestant church. Uh, I don't know much about that denomination, the history of the denomination, but somebody named Robinson was trying to move in on him, and there had been a horrible accident. The women in the church wanted a women's auxiliary, and they wanted to give lunches. My grandparents were very much against it, and there had been this horrible accident where they had a stove in the basement of the church, and something had caught on fire when they were making one of these elaborate lunches, and the woman had started burning up, and clothes caught on fire, and she ran upstairs and burned to death on the lawn outside the church. So this was like a market, black market against our God. And so this guy, young preacher named Robinson, was trying to get the church away from him. It was for that reason that, and also because Emily could go to Northwestern on what was called a ministerial dispensation for 40% off the tuition of Northwestern University. She could go to Northwestern, so they decided to move to Evanston, where they started. They rented an apartment building, and my grandfather, being a good carpenter that he was, made these little cubicles so that there was enough space for a little dresser and a table to write on, so that Northwestern students could room there. And my grandmother May would make meals for them, and so they had actually one of Evelyn's husband, George McClay, was one of the students that lived in the apartment in these little spaces my grandfather made, which was enough room for a cot and a tiny place for clothes to hang in, and maybe a table that they could write on or do their studies on. So off they went. They left town, and he left his church. And every time they would come back to Argus to visit, people would turn out in large numbers to see them, because many of them they'd actually brought into the world as midwives. My grandmother and grandfather became midwives. Both of them learned midwifery from government printing office, how to sterilize all the sheets by boiling everything, and towels, everything used in the birth, because the local baby doctor lost a lot of women and children, so that's why they both became studied midwifery, and so that many of the people they had not only brought into the world, but they buried many people in their town. So everybody, and that is the job of a minister. When people die, not only to comfort the families, but to perform all the final interment ceremonies, and so they would be greeted by many people. I mean, just as an example of the kind of friendships they had in Plymouth County, near Plymouth, Indiana, where my father was born in 1906. One day, the Wright brothers were coming to Plymouth to give a demonstration of one of their flying machines taking off. My grandfather, who was absolutely fascinated by aeronautics, and which led to his invention of his plane that would fly straight up, and then with the airplane seat on swivels, it would then be able to go horizontal, which he got at the end of his life, taught himself patent law, got 5 claims on his patent application, and then it was later copied by the Navy and somehow put into production, and it was called the Progress. This is a flying, a plane that could fly straight up, right off of the deck of an aircraft carrier, for example, and then go horizontally. The Navy came out with this plane. I've sent letters to Rear Admiral Kirby and to others, to the Department of Defense, to find out about this plane, but apparently the Navy just copied the patent, waiting for it to run out. I think it was 17 years in those days. My father worked with a man who was a reporter on the Boston Herald after he had won the New York Film Honor Prize and premiered his first symphony in D. He worked on it to try to find somebody to manufacture this reporter for the Boston Herald. Tried to help him, but to no avail. But the Navy just anticipated the patent running out and had it all ready to go. So there was no patent infringement, just because we pinned on them. I've tried to pursue it without success. My grandfather had a model of this flying machine. The last person I showed the patent to, the original, I no longer have in my possession. And I've sent to Washington to the patent office for a copy. No answer. He had a model of it in the basement of this apartment building, and this thing would fly straight up, and it worked out this ingenious method of getting rid of vibration by running the propellers and also probably the angles at which the blades were he worked out some way mathematically that he believed that he could eliminate vibration. Now, I would have to check this with aeronautics, people in aeronautics at MIT, which is near where I live in Cambridge. I have to really know if that would work out mathematically. With an 8th grade education, he could do mental algebra. He was very ingenious in what he could do with not only in the building and with his factory, making porch columns and all sorts of other things, and doing prefab houses on a bet that he could get a house up in 5 weeks. My grandfather, definitely a man of extraordinary genius, and the last person I showed the original of his patent to was the young man. His father was the chief financial officer of Rolex in Switzerland, who's now become had a sex change and become Bernice Metzler, I think is his last name. He's the one who invented the drone. and now is a professor of aeronautics at the University of Minnesota. And now a woman. He's a very handsome, blonde, Swiss young man who actually got married to a pretty blonde Swiss girl, and is now has changed his sex to female. Ernie is a collector of some of my best drawings. One being the drawing of a burnout house, and he decorated his whole apartment in Cambridge with my drawings. And one of the, at that particular time in my life, one of the few times that I actually sold something. But he now is a professor, I think, of aeronautics at the University of Minnesota. He lives in Indianapolis. Where also my first cousin Evelyn's son, John McClay, lives, and was remarried and retired there. My wife, Patricia, knows Minneapolis well because she promoted her wonderful translation of the words she said about Mary Cardinal. We get great sales at the university, in various departments of the University of Minnesota, as well as in St. Paul, Minnesota. The extraordinary job she did promoting her translation was a 15-hour-a-day effort that went on for 2 years. Not only the translation itself, but it was largely funded through her ingenuity by psychoanalytic institutes. The transportation costs of bringing Marie Cardinal, the writer of the words to say it, out to Los Angeles and
all over the country.
all over the country.
A 3-month overdue.
The University of
Which
California
established
in Haywood.
the authority of that text.
I hereby now conclude this addendum to the history of my father's career in music and some other supplementary remarks about his daily habits, etc., and the nature of his home life and his original family.
Okay, stop.
I end with thank you.
Allô? Ah, Mathieu, comment ça va? Ok, mais c'était triste ici à Paris avec tout ce qui est passé. Oui, c'est fini.